If you are wondering how to take any topic and generate valuable insights, prepare to receive great value from this presentation by Gavin. Jeremy works in digital marketing, advertising, and digital ad tech by profession. He also teaches digital marketing short courses and is an insatiable generalist at heart, naturally gravitating towards breadth of knowledge rather than depth. And like many of us, Jeremy has struggled with balancing consumption with creation. In the following, Jeremy shares his results in focusing on one topic and deepening his insights around it using an MOC, a map of content. That topic is on aphorisms. What is an aphorism? And how are they like a horizon? And why do they require brilliance? And why is this presentation so fascinating? I'll share my opinion why at the end. Let's view Jeremy's process now.
Today I'm going to go through my MOC on aphorisms, which is this little node here within my graph. So I'm not going to kind of go through my entire graph. I'm going to keep it really kind of focused. So aphorisms was one that I wanted to look at because I had very mixed feelings towards aphorisms. And just to kick off, I'll go into what an aphorism actually is, which was a difficult thing to define for me. So the standard dictionary response for what is an aphorism is that it's a pithy, succinct saying that attempts to capture a truth about the world. But as with a lot of dictionary definitions, it lacks a bit of context and content. It's more about how people use that word rather than what it actually is. So a principle that I've come to use when trying to find out what something actually is going down to the etymological roots to build an understanding around a word from a first principles. Where did this come from? What are the components of the word? So the etymology of an aphorism, it's actually derived from the word horizon. So a boundary or a definitive boundary. So it's kind of like a barrier between understanding and then the infinite beyond that. So an aphorism is like the demarcation of something. It's a definitive line on the distance that someone else draws for you. So if we go into, if we have a look at my linked thought of what an aphorism is and looking at the etymology. So I was reading a book called The Theory of an Aphorism, and the horizon analogy got kind of taken to the next level. And it was the horizon is a superficial boundary. And as you approach it, it always kind of moves away from you. So with an aphorism, when a smart person goes and puts a definition or a line between the universe and the infinite and what we understand, we can look at it and say, okay, yep, sure, I agree with you. That's the horizon. Or we can walk towards it. And while we may not ever reach the horizon, the journey itself can be very enlightening on all of the things you find along the way, even though the horizon is always there on the distance. So I went back and had a look at like what was the actual first aphorism that came about and what's the origin story of an aphorism. And it was actually Hippocrates, the father of not modern medicine, but medicine in general. And the very first aphorism attributed to him was life is short and the art is long. Expanding that out, blowing it up, the crisis is fleeting, the experience perilous, the decision difficult, and really talks to the plight of a doctor. A human life is short, and then the actual act of learning about how to extend a human life or to learn about how to save a human life is a really long effort that takes, which can never really be achieved. Again, it's a horizon. And so that's a very difficult conflict for a doctor to face. And so the original aphorisms were heuristics about how to deal with health issues and medicine. And I've done a bit of interpretation. So interpretation was an important thing for me when looking into these aphorisms. So the reason that I became interested in aphorisms were for a couple of reasons. I read this quote by Susan Sontag on Farnham Street, which is another great website that looks at mental models and things like that. And in the article, it was a quote from one of her books, and she really railed against aphorisms. So aphoristic thinking is impatient thinking. It's the commodification of knowledge. It's aristocratic thinking, smart people handing down ideas and expecting you to accept it without question. So the other book that I read, The Theory of Aphorism, was more apologetic towards it. So that's more the problem of aphorisms, but the benefit of aphorisms, according to that book, was that aphorisms are atomic due to the potential that they contain. So in defense of the aphorism, it is a low barrier to entry for deep thinking. It's a sentence or a paragraph that once you explode it out, it's kind of atomic, not in the same way that we talk about it with evergreen notes. It's more the bonds that are within the aphorism. Once you start tearing them apart, they explode with energy when you start to interpret them. But that also requires the aphorism requires both the writer and the reader to be brilliant. So if you just take an aphorism at face value, you're running the risk of running into the commodification of knowledge, like Susan Sontag was talking about. So I wanted to look at aphorisms as a way of reducing my consumption, because an aphorism is just a small, pithy sentence. And then in the act of interpreting, it meant that I could jump in and start to do some thinking of my own and blowing up these atomic aphorisms and getting into my own thoughts. It was a way of doing this filtering and reducing the noise by not having words and words and words on a page. I was still running across some conflicts with that, because there are problems with aphorisms. So the thing about an aphorism is it's pithy and it's kind of poetic in a lot of ways. And so an aphorism support really comes from the resonance that it has in people's hearts and minds, and not necessarily from evidence and logic. And you need to trust that it's an abstraction of something at the end of the day. So you need to trust that the person who has written the aphorism has done the work. And aphorisms are really disarming in their simplicity and their aesthetic. So this is just a little something I wrote. They dissolve like a sugary pill or a supposed truth, and we move on to the next sweet treat without questioning it and its nutritional content. I used to find that with like inspirational quotes and things, which are a lot different from an aphorism, but they can be the same. You just consume them and eat them, and you don't blow them up and look at what their content is. And then also the aphorism is not so humble. It's coming from a smart mind, and sometimes smart minds, there's a bit of intelligence arrogance. They don't feel like they need to put the work in to justify things because they're so used to being right. And so they can stand there. They've just got a really good pedigree coming from the brain of someone smart. And I found that I found reading to Nicholas Taleb, a lot of his aphorisms there was such a great volume of them that it was, you could tell that he thought he was right, but I felt like I really need to go deeper into it. So let's talk about the types of aphorisms that are out there. So I really enjoyed kind of breaking it down into the types of aphorisms that you can find. This is just a few. I think there were 8, but you've got the moral. So another distinction of the aphorism is that it really should feel like a truth from all of the perspectives that someone can look at that aphorism from. So the moral, you've got the golden rule, but then also every lie is an assault on autonomy of those who lie to us. Sam Harris on lying. The observation and comparison, it's just a comparison of our current state of being to a seeming ideal. So I hated this. This is the most boring aphorism that I've probably ever heard, but children are naturally inquisitive and open-minded. We adults could learn something from them. It's an example of an observation, but I definitely want to replace that one. It was from a YouTube video that I was watching. The paradox, the older that we get, the more like a child we become. The chiasmus is probably my favorite / least favorite, because it is one of the most poetic ones. It's one of the ones that you'll come across most out on like Twitter and the internet. And it can be really appealing because it just has that nice, beautiful ABBA type structure. So it goes, if you have, and you can kind of see an example of the ABBA structure there. it crosses over. So if you have nothing to do, do nothing. So nothing is A, do, B, do, A, nothing. You can see it in this one by Chekhov as well. In nature, a repulsive caterpillar turns into a lovely butterfly. But with human beings, it is the other way around. A lovely butterfly turns into a repulsive caterpillar. And I've tried to do a little bit of interpretation on that. But yes, the chiasmus is it's a tricky one, and you do kind of see it a lot, and you need to be careful of it because it is aesthetically pleasing when it is presented in that way, which can cause you, it makes it a little more sugary with that sugar pill kind of metaphor. So I did some attempts on interpreting some aphorisms, but first of all, aphorisms that make me laugh. I found that the best aphorisms were those that kind of lay humanity flat with a scathing critique, often so brutal that you just have to laugh. So Chekhov was one of them. Another one from Pascal: man, judge of all things, feeble earthworm, repository of truth, sink of doubt and error, glory and refuse of the universe. Just it's hilarious. And it's a paradox as well. So you can kind of see that structure of the aphorism there. So every part of that aphorism was a paradox. Judge of all things, but a feeble earthworm, a repository of truth, but a sink of doubt and error, glory and refuse of the universe. And then I really like this one from Huxley because I was talking a bit about, I've been thinking a lot about identity and cognition and labels that we put on things. And I found that was a great way to approach aphorisms, because if you're thinking about something already, I got this great book called The Vikings Book of Aphorisms, which was written in 1965. And it was beautiful because it had this index at the back where you could look up certain words. And so when I went to an aphorism that was focusing on a very specific thing that I was thinking about, it made me dive into it more. So I found that as a really useful way of approaching it. But my interpretation of this one, tolerably early in life, I discovered that one of the unpardonable sins in the eyes of most people is for a man/person to go about unlabeled. The world regards such a person as the police do an unmuzzled dog. And this is where the terminology of, and when you go into context, which is also very important for an aphorism, finding the original context, it was the root of his coining of the term agnosticism. So one of his great frustrations was being labeled as an empiricist or a materialist. So Thomas Huxley was Darwin's kind of attack dog. He went out there and fought for evolution to get put in place. And that got him labeled with a lot of things. But as an agnostic, it was not to be a label in itself, but to be a claim of the limits of our knowledge. So again, that horizon idea kind of popping up again. There are certain things beyond our cognition. Agnosticism is simply acknowledges that. So agnosticism is the antithesis of a label, and it's an unconditional surrender to hypocognition. So hypocognition is when you lack the linguistic framework or the cognitive framework to process raw information around you. And a lot of the time we're not aware of it, but agnosticism is kind of being aware of not having that framework, and then still, but kind of leaning into it. And around identity, I think maybe sometimes we need to be a little more agnostic around who someone is. Just because they exhibit certain features doesn't necessarily mean that they're part of a certain group. And I just thought that was an important takeout, which wasn't necessarily what he was talking about, but something that linked my thinking. And when you do look at that graph, you can see it linking up into that identity MOC as well. So I've done a lot of ranting and rambling and everything like that. So I'll open it up, I suppose. I know I was very focused towards one specific thing. So yeah, any other questions beyond that, I'm happy to answer as well.
Seeing Jeremy's process is greatly inspiring, but why is it so special? Well, besides the fascinating topic, it's because Jeremy shows us a blueprint on how to take any topic and generate tremendous value from exploring it. So if you are tired of over-consuming and underthinking, and you know there's a better way, this blueprint offers a way out of the noise and back to the signal. It's note-making, not note-taking. Thank you, Jeremy, for showing how to raise your thinking game as a note maker. As always, there are so many more fascinating and inspiring people I hope to showcase with you because they show how personal the process of thinking and managing knowledge can be, and they give us glimpses and illumination into how we can take our thinking games to the next level. If you enjoyed this, just like one of the comments below, and I'll see you next time.